All right, so thanks everybody for being here. A few familiar faces. This is going to be a casual description of the business plan or business plan summary that you're going to be writing for the Proteus competition. Feel free to raise your hand, ask questions during the process. It's all good. Sound is good?
For me, yeah, but you might want to speak a little bit just to amplify it here.
Okay, sounds all right.
Thank you.
Okay, first, of course, we have to thank our sponsors. We cannot do this without sponsors. The Proteus competition wouldn't exist. Any of the pitch competitions that you see would not exist without the sponsorship, and we are very grateful to the sponsors for supporting the Proteus business competition once again this year. So thanks to the platinum sponsors and all the sponsors, including some industry support that we've received from the local community. There's 3 technologies and there's 3 institutions. Everyone knows there's the CRISPR microbiomodulation technology from Western. McMaster has a neonatal laryngoscope, and the University of Windsor a flexible pressure sensor. I assume everyone was present for the launch and the description of the technologies that was provided in the launch, and you've all reached out to the innovators at each of the institutions, for the technology that you're going to be working on. As Lisa mentioned, this is a pitch competition. Once you get to the pitch, I believe there's 2 teams selected for each technology, so you have a 50% chance of winning the prize. You got to get there though, and to get there you got to do the business plan. Just a reminder, today is the business plan workshop. Business plan submission date is 3rd of February, not too far away. The pitch workshop, I'll be doing the pitch workshop as well, and that's on the 27th of February, and the pitch competition is on the 26th of March. Business plans. So in the past, when I've gone through this, has everyone looked at the website and you know you're doing a 4-page business plan? Really, a summary of a business plan? I often get the question of, what does a regular business plan look like? So I thought I would just get that out of the way. You can find regular business plans everywhere. This example is taken from BDC. They have a business plan template. It's as good as any of them. They're kind of generic. They would all need to be customized for whichever industry you're in. And you can see they talk about the description of the business, a lot about the market, the competitive situation for that market, what your operations are, what your sales and marketing plans are, your action plan, and a summary. And that's pretty typical. These are often 100-page documents that are live documents. They're always evolving. That is not what you're doing today. What you're doing today is really focusing on the most important parts of a business plan. And you're going to summarize it in a 4-page summary. This is taken right off the website, so you can go to the website and grab this. Describe the market. I'm going to go through each of these in more detail. A description of the market, which means what's the problem, who's the customer. Describe the technology you're working on. And then describe how that technology will get to the marketplace. Okay. So the idea is to focus on those elements that are the most important. So it doesn't include operations, it doesn't really include sales and marketing strategies. Right? All the things that are in a full business plan, you're focusing on the core elements of a business model. Why is that? Really, we want to focus on those elements that help you achieve your goal. And what's the goal? Creating a viable commercialization strategy. Note, I did not say creating a commercialization strategy. I did say create a viable commercialization strategy. What does that mean? Right? You can create commercialization strategies, but the focus is going to be on, is it viable or not? So we know that developing technology is difficult. Developing businesses out of technology is a challenge. We are in institutions. In fact, all these technologies come from institutions where new ideas and new technologies are developed all the time. And the focus is usually on technology development. But not all technologies have an obvious business model. Usually the business model is associated, it's a bit of a black box. All right? The focus is on technology development. And the issue with that, for those who do look at how businesses fare, turns out that technology businesses are risky. There's a high failure rate. And when they do autopsies on these businesses, it's interesting. They find out that more of them fail because of business model failures than because of technology failures. So the technology may work perfectly well, but the business failed because the business model didn't work. So how do we reduce the risk of failure? How do we increase the chance of success? There's always going to be a chance, especially in the early stage, that the technology isn't going to work very well. Sometimes it takes time to develop a technology. If you're doing drug development, you may not know until your phase 3 clinical trials whether that drug actually works or doesn't work. But how do we reduce the risk of failure? We want to eliminate the chance that you'll fail due to a business model failure. We want to focus on creating a viable business model for the technology, so really the only risk you're taking is technology risk. How do we do that? So instead of focusing on technology development and how the technology will be developed, we want to focus on how the business will be developed. What is the business? How will it exist? What does it do? So we change our focus from technology development to business model development. And what is a business model? I explain it in one sentence. A business model describes how the technology provides for a product or service that's needed in the market and valued by the customer. The colors are not by accident, and those are important points. A business is a product or service. Your technology is going to allow for a business to create a product or service. The technology itself might be a product, or it may enable a service. It depends on the technology. But the key thing is, it's going to provide a product or service that is needed in the marketplace and valued by the customer. So your job in writing a business model is understanding how it's needed in the marketplace and valued by the customer. And this is a big idea. Focusing on business models is something that came about around 2000 and that thereabouts. A fellow named Steve Blank. Has anybody heard of Steve Blank? Who has not heard of Steve Blank? Just a couple. Most people have then, vast majority. Steve Blank, professor of entrepreneurship, Stanford, Berkeley, coined the phrase, technology startup is the search for a sustainable business model. Once you have a sustainable business model, you are a business. Your focus then is on executing on that business. Until then, you're searching for a sustainable business model. So what is it? Where do you look? How do you find it? So your job, I mean, you're looking for the diamond in the rough. You're looking for that bit of gold. You're looking for that viable commercialization strategy. Searching for it. Let me give you an example from many, many years ago. Nexia, BioSteel. Nexia was a biotech company founded in 1993 in Montreal. Their original idea was to work on lactose-free milk. Lactose-free milk didn't exist at the time. Right? So they were going to do that. Turned out that project fell through. They couldn't do it for whatever reason. But they did have a little bit of money to start, and they thought, well, what can we do? So they got rights to genes from spiders that encode silk. Spider silk genes. And they thought, well, let's do something with that. So they created a herd of transgenic goats, which they called spider goats, that expressed the spider silk in the milk of the goats. So they could milk the goats, extract the silk, and they'd have spider silk. They called it BioSteel. They raised $70 million. Back then, that was a lot of money. Today, that's a lot of money. Back then, it was even more money. Okay, BioSteel never worked, never developed into a viable product. When they talked to the CEO of the company, he said that, you know, it was a really interesting research project, but the dilemma remains, what's the end use of the product? So today, you could not raise any money without knowing what the end use of the product is in a technology company. Okay. They did not have a viable commercialization strategy. They didn't know what the product was going to be used for. They didn't know what the problem in the marketplace was or who the customer was. Some of the fundamental questions that we want to address. So you must understand both the market, or the end use of the product, and the technology. And just as a reminder, sales of lactose-free milk are over $1 billion per year. Had they managed to stay in that, they would have been a very, very successful company, possibly. Okay. Describe the market. This is the first step in your 4-page. You only have 4 pages. This is really just a summary document, high-level document. You really want to get to the heart of the matter. What's the problem? Is the problem real? Every month, there are there are entrepreneurs pitching to investors here in London. There are a number of angel groups, number of investor groups that come through, and entrepreneurs are pitching their ideas to investors. The first thing the investor does is try to understand whether the problem is real in about the first minute. If they don't think the problem is real, they'll probably tune out the rest of the discussion. Because if you're not addressing a real problem, you don't have a business. So what is the problem you're addressing? Is it real? And then define it. What problem is the technology addressing? How is the problem currently addressed? If it's a real problem, it is addressed in some way. How are the people who have the problem currently dealing with it? Because that tells you you have to do something with your technology that's better than what is currently occurring. So you have to know the current state of affairs, and then what improvement your technology provides to that. Why are the current solutions not adequate, and what improvements are desired? It's going to be better, faster, cheaper in some way. Not all 3 necessarily, okay? But some way superior, some way satisfying the customer's needs. In addition, you need to define who the customer is. Who has the problem? You know, you've established the problem's real, but who has it? Who is the customer? It sounds simple. It's not always simple. You want to understand who has the problem. How many customers are there, usually on an annual basis? People want to know. How many customers on an annual basis will you be able to sell your technology to? I'm going to go through that in a little bit more detail. What motivates the customer to change to a new solution? There's a problem. They're trying to deal with a problem, and they want a new solution, but what's required to change? How would you find that out? Anybody?
You can go around and discuss with industry experts what they're looking for.
Or,
Consumer wants.
what does that mean?
So whatever the consumer wants, if it's not being satisfied within the market, and
So how would you find that out?
through surveys,
Surveys?
data.
Or you could talk to the customer. One of the most important things, and one of the things that's often overlooked, surprisingly, even in companies that are fairly advanced, is not talking to the customer. If you talk to the customer, you're going to figure out whether the problem's real, how they feel about it, how much better would a solution need to be to get them to change, and how easy is it to change. Sometimes it's not easy to change. They're stuck. Talk to the customer. That's probably the most important piece of advice you'll ever get about business. Talk to the customer. Let me give you another example. This, in the old days, this is what an inhaler looked like. It was big. Right? There was a technology question of, could we create a delivery system for protein in which you can inhale protein and it will get into your system, it'll get into your blood system, it'll get into your circulation. Large proteins, pretty difficult, but small proteins or large peptides like insulin might be possible. Nectar Therapeutics, next slide, developed a way to do it, and it was licensed by Pfizer, and they created inhaled insulin, and it was approved by the FDA in January of 2006. Okay. Pfizer predicted it would bring in $2 billion a year in sales by 2010. So in 4 years, they're going to have an enormous, a multi-billion-dollar drug delivery system. Be very, very successful. Analysts expected a whole bunch of copycats now that it's been approved, and it would probably inhaled insulin would turn into a $5 billion market. Tells you how good analysts are. So, anybody know anyone who has diabetes and injects insulin? Right? It's fairly common. It's not unusual. When you inject insulin, the injectors, before insulin pumps, right? Before insulin pumps were common, injections are minor, they're very accurate, you can dial in the exact dose that you need, and they're discreet. You can inject through your clothing. Nobody needs to know you're taking a dose of insulin. Very different than pulling a giant bong out of your purse and taking a hit of insulin just before your meal in a restaurant, right? So it's not discreet. It's not very accurate. You can't control dosing. Not nearly as well as an injection. It costs more, and there's no benefit. Actual worldwide sales, 4 million. They shut the program down and wrote off $2.8 billion. A couple points I want to make about this. How could this have been avoided? Let me back up. What's the problem they're addressing?
Doesn't seem like there was a real problem.
Well, that's the end result. What do you think they were addressing?
Fear of injection.
People don't like to inject.
People don't like injections. People don't like needles. So had you gone out and done a customer survey and said, do you like injections? The answer would have been,
I don't mind them.
I don't like them. Nobody likes injections. But that's not really what they're doing, right? What they're doing is they're saying, would you prefer this, or would you prefer the little discrete little injector, which is mostly painless? It was pretty clear what the customer wanted. And how could they have avoided that? Talk to the customer. Keep in mind, this is Pfizer, right? It's not amateur startups. These are professional drug marketers. And they didn't get it right. What's really interesting is mankind went and repeated it exactly the same thing, except they made their inhaler smaller, a puffer, right? So it is discrete. Still, no real sales, because it didn't solve a real problem, right? So you need to solve a real problem that your customer cares about, that they're willing to change what they're doing now and adopt a new technology which provides a significant solution. And how could you prevent it from happening? Talk to your customer. So we talked about who is the customer and defining the customer. So here's an example of a technology, let's say a cream to reduce scarring. Who would care? Well, anybody who gets surgery would probably care. You don't want scars. So about 100 million patients per year undergo surgery, but they decided, well, to enter this market, let's find out those customers who care the most. And this is a really important point. Sometimes your technology will address what you think is a very large market, but you're trying to find the customer that cares the most, that has the biggest problem, that is most likely to change what they're doing and adopt a new technology. So in this case, well, let's go to cosmetic reconstructive surgery. 6.3 million procedures globally, 1.6 million per year in the US. It's sometimes elective and sometimes paid for by the patient. So you're not worried about reimbursement and billing through insurance companies. And if it's a really good product and reduce the scarring, people who are getting cosmetic surgery will probably want that. So who's the customer? Who benefits? The patient benefits. They have less scarring. Who uses the product? The surgeon. Who buys the product? The surgeon. Who pays for the product? Well, it's passed through to the patient, so the patient pays for the product. So who do you have to convince that this product is worth adopting? The surgeons. So you're going to have to talk to the surgeons about what level of improvement would you need to adopt this product. They want to improve their patient's care, so they will adopt it if it works, and it works significantly. I want to talk a little bit about numbers. Sometimes when you're writing business plans or when you're pitching ideas, you'll get your hands on market reports that will describe global markets for whatever sector you're in. Could be automotive sector, which is, I think, a $1.2 trillion market. Could be medical devices, right? Billion-dollar markets. And you'll quote the market as being a $1.2 trillion market. Nobody cares. When you are trying to come up with an idea for a business model to match to your technology, what people want to know is who are the customers and how many are there for the first thing that you're going to sell it, the first business case for it. So investment industry uses something called discounted cash flow. I'm not going to talk about this. You can look it up. You don't need to know it for this. But just so you know, it's a prediction of what future cash flows would be if your technology development program is successful. With a bunch of assumptions built into it. They also, companies, well, they also use comparables to calculate valuations. In other words, you have a technology that solves a problem, so do your competitors, yours is better. What's the value of your competitors? So understanding who your competitors are and what they are is super important. Companies use something called customer-driven forecasting. That's a bottom-up analysis versus top-down. That means how many customers do you have? If you're doing a patient population, how many patients are there? If they are subdivided into different groups, which group are you going after? How is your treatment used? Is it used acutely, once? Is it used chronically for the rest of their life? That makes it has a big impact on the potential value of your business. And then you describe how many target patients could be treated each year. How many customers would you have on an annual basis? How many products could you sell annually? Roughly for how much? And if you sold 100% into that market, what does that market look like? It just gives a value around the market. Bigger is not necessarily better, but it's important to know. I'll give you an example. This is, let's say you had a drug to treat ischemic stroke patients. In the US, the incidence of stroke is about 795,000 per year. You're going after patients who have had their first stroke because you need to measure an improvement and you don't want damage from previous strokes to mess up your measurement. So initially, you're going to go after patients who have had their first strokes. That's 76% of that. You're going after ischemic stroke. There's two types of strokes. Those patients who have bleeding, which causes a stroke, and those patients who have ischemia caused by a blood clot, lack of blood flow to the brain. That's 87% of the patients. So now you're down to 530,000 patients per year. Of course, you're going after patients who have a mid-level stroke. So you're not going after the patients that have a super severe stroke. There's no room for improvement. There's too much damage. You're not going after patients who have too minor a stroke because you won't be able to measure any improvement. There's not enough damage. You're going after patients who have a mid-level stroke. So how many patients are diagnosed and categorized as to the type of stroke they have? Turns out 85%. So, and of those, only 6% have a medium-level stroke, so you're down to 270,000 patients. Now, you've looked at other drugs or devices in this category, and they can sell for about 15,000 per treatment. So you make an estimate. Well, if I can sell mine for 15,000, I know there's 270,000 patients per year, so that's potentially $4 billion per year. That's the size of my market, 100%. You're never going to get 100%. That's okay. It just draws a box. It tells you what the market is. So when it comes to numbers, it's important to know your numbers. In this case, know your customer, who your customer is, and how many there are. If you've done competitive analysis, so you know what there's similar products to solve the problem you're addressing, you know what those can be sold for. So you're going to be in a similar ballpark. Presumably yours is much better. Maybe you'll sell it for a bit more. And that will tell you the size of your market. There's no right or wrong answer. Well, there is. The wrong answer is not knowing, and the right answer is knowing and being accurate about it. But the exact value is, it is whatever it is, whatever that market is. You want to know what the value is. So, we talked about the problem, making sure it's real, making sure who your customer is, who has the problem, how many there are, competitive analysis to know how your technology compares to the other technologies that are out there solving the same problem. Now you want to describe your technology, your solution. How does the technology allow you to address the customer's needs? You don't need to necessarily get into the minutia of how the technology works. Right? What is important is that it solves a problem that a customer really wants solved. It is also important that it works. What are the measurable improvements over current practices and why does the customer care? In other words, the customer already has a problem, they're already dealing with it. How much better do you need to be than whatever they're currently doing to get them to buy? And does your technology allow for that? Is the technology ready to go, or does it need to be developed? This is important. You know, if you're doing a medical device, it probably needs a fair amount of development. If you're doing a drug, well, clearly it's going to need a lot of development. And what does that process look like? What does the development pathway look like in general terms? What are the hurdles you need to overcome? Are there IP issues? What are the regulatory hurdles? What's required in terms of cost and time? It's kind of if you can get to that, that's amazing. But if you have a general idea, it's good. So a technology development plan might be something very high level. It might look something like this for a medical device. It may require a certain amount of prototyping and testing before you get to a clinical trial, regulatory decision, and a product launch. If you're in a different market, let's say you're in an educational market or a training market, there may be no regulatory barrier. You might be able to make it and get it on the market right away. But just understand what that process is. It's more about focusing on, why this should be done than the details, the minute details of how it should be done, right? You're doing it because there's a need in the marketplace and it's an attractive market. But this is the process. I mean, if anybody was going to invest in this, or if you were going to do this, you want to know what it takes to get there. What does it take to get onto the market at a high level? What are the hurdles? You may have regulatory hurdles you need to overcome. You might have to get FDA approval or Health Canada approval. There might be standards you need to meet in general. There usually are. So just having a general idea that needs to be done, you don't need to know the details of it, right? Just know that, yeah, that needs to be done. As I say, it depends on your business. If you're in drugs, it's highly regulated, and there's a lot involved in getting to market. If you're a training device, very few regulations potentially, and you can get to the market right away. This is just a generic slide on the role of IP in the business. All of these technologies have IP around them, right? Because they're all coming from tech transfer offices. So you have IP. But you want to understand a little bit about the role of IP in a business in general. Usually you're having a business strategy to get your technology to market. You want to make sure your IP strategy matches. You want to make sure that, is there any IP out there that you need to get this to market? Are you prevented from getting this to market because somebody else has IP? Do you have freedom to act? So when you're doing your competitive analysis to see what else is in that market and how you are better, if there are other things in the market and you think they're exactly the same, you might want to see if they have an IP position. It doesn't mean you can't do it, right? It just means you may need to negotiate an agreement to get it done. For small companies, for small technology startups, IP that you're starting with, plus a really good business model equals investment. If you attract investment into your company, they're investing because you have IP. It's the only thing you really have, right? It's the only thing that's tangible that investors will put money into the business to acquire. But they're only going to do it if your business model makes sense. If the problem's real, the customers are there, and they really want a new solution. And then it makes sense to, yeah, let's invest in that. Let's develop this technology. Let me just summarize. This is everything I've talked about so far. You have identified a problem in the market, and you know it's real because you've talked to your customers. You know who has the problem because you've talked to your customers. You know it's significant, and you know they're looking for a new solution. You happen to have a cool new technology that's a solution to the problem. It may not be a perfect fit right away, right? It may take a little bit of going back and forth, of getting the technology to do what it really needs to do to solve the problem the customer has. You also may need to maybe select a subset of the customers that have the best fit for that solution. So it's an iterative process. You're trying to align your technology with the marketplace. And this has a special name. It's called product market fit. Without product market fit, you don't have business. You don't have a pathway forward. That's why your 4-page description of the business plan is focused on product market fit. Ensuring that the technology solves a real problem for real customers and that it fits into the marketplace. Then the last section, describe in general terms how the technology gets to the market. You know who's going to use it. You have an idea who's going to pay for it. Sometimes it's the customer, sometimes it's hospital, it may be an insurance company, but you'll have figured that part out. And who decides on the purchase and what is the revenue model that you're, how do you make money off this? But you have to decide how this technology gets to market, which means who will produce, distribute, sell, and maintain the technology. In the simplest case of a business, let's say you're a store, you're a retail store. You acquire the raw materials, you manufacture the product, you sell it to your customers, and you take care of all the customers' needs. Maintenance of the technology, the warranty issues, everything else that may come with that customer interaction. Sales and marketing, you do it all. In technology development businesses, that's not usually the case. You have to decide what portion, what it is that you're doing to develop the technology. And what this comes down to is, are you going to do everything, or are you ultimately going to license this to a partner that specializes in the sales and marketing in that sector? So understanding the role of partnerships, that partnerships may play. And the reason you want to do that is because developing a technology to sell to a customer is one thing, but if your first sale is to a partner, you need to understand what the partners are looking for. Let me give, so I gave an example of a storefront where you do everything. Let me go to the other extreme, biotech model, where you're developing a drug. You have new drug discovery, you develop some IP, you're going after something that's going to save people's lives. So it's attractive, there's a need. It's going to cost maybe $30 million before you get evidence in humans that it likely is safe and is doing what you think it does. Yeah, your phase 2 clinical trials. But if the market is sufficient, say $1 billion per year, you'll probably get venture capital or investors to support that. But investors are not going to take you all the way to the market. They expect this last portion, which is phase 3 clinical trials and commercialization, product launch, sales and marketing, all that support. It's very, very expensive. It's going to cost at least $100 million to do that. That's a job of a pharma company. They want a pharma company to take on that risk and that expense. So they want to exit at this point and do a deal with a pharma company. Some kind of transaction. So in your development of your technology, you have to understand the space that you're in and how technologies are developed in that space. And at whether you're taking it all the way to market, which is possible depending on the technology, or whether you're involved, you're going to do some kind of partnership in that process. And the partner is going to take it to market. So in biotech and drugs are not part of this. I don't think there's any drugs that are part of the technologies. That's an extreme example. Let me give you another example, which is something that we see all the time, something like this that comes out of development in a hospital. A respiratory technologist has to deal with intubated patients. So patients who cannot breathe on their own are intubated, and they're put on a respirator. And every time you move the patient, you have to disconnect that respirator and connect him to a portable respirator. And then reverse that when you move them back to their bed, to a permanent respirator. So every time they disconnect them, the lungs collapse and whatever's in that tube spews into the respiratory technologist's face. And finally, he got fed up and he said, why can't we just make a little thing, a little plastic widget that has a valve in it, so when we disconnect the respirator, the valve closes just from the pressure, and then we can connect the other portable respirator, and then the valve will open when we start the respiration process again. Why can't we do that? So there was nothing existing. He thought, well, I'll do it. And he designed a little plastic widget that will do that. It's called the Fluzo bypass. Connects between the tube for the tracheal tube and the respirator, and there's an extra tube for administering drugs or other things. This is a little piece of plastic. It's a medical device, but it's a little plastic widget. This is going to sell for tens of dollars. Maybe. I don't know what the price is. $10, $50. It's a small number. Are there a huge number of people on respirators? It's not huge. There are a significant number, but it's not enormous. Is this a really, really big market? Is this a multi-billion-dollar market? What does your gut tell you? No, it's not. It's a real market. You know, you're selling a low-cost plastic widget. It's needed in the market. It performs a very valuable service. People want it. And you're going to sell a bunch, but it's not a giant market. So if you're going to develop this, could you create a company and just sell this one thing and exist as a company? What do you think? No. This is more of a line item in somebody else's catalog, right? Some other company that sells into the respiratory market, this is really a line item in their catalog. So if you wanted to develop this, who would you go to help you develop this? Are you going to take it to market, or are you going to look for a partner? Who would that partner be?
Probably a company that already makes like other medical devices.
In that market, in the respiratory market. That's right. And that's what they did. They found a company that sells into the respiratory market. They're a sales and marketing company, and they said, are you willing to license this technology? I have a patent. I don't actually have the device. It needs to go through a full development program. Okay, let me refresh. You only have 4 pages. It's not a lot, right? That's not a lot of space. You can't go into a lot of detail. So let's keep in mind what the most important things are. Product market fit is the most important. The market and the technology, does the technology address the problem? Is the problem real? Are the customers real? How many are there? What is that market? Size and scope of the market. How does the technology work? Not in detail. How does it solve the problem? How is it better than the competition? Why would your customer care? How's it going to get to market? Who's going to use it? Who's going to pay for the development? Do you need to partner? Is this a partnership deal, or are you going to take it all the way? If you're having trouble, just keep in mind the goal. Creating a viable commercialization strategy. What makes it viable? Addressing a real problem. Having real customers that care about that problem and need a new solution. And you know that because you've talked to the customer. Understand how the technology allows for a new product or service that's needed in the market and valued by its customers. Identify a sustainable business model. Make sure you have good product market fit. Understand how you'll generate sustainable and growing revenue. In other words, know your numbers. How many customers are there? What is that market? What are your competitors selling into there for? You know, what does it look like? Just at a very high level. And there's no apps that are part of this, right? Nobody's doing an app. If you are ever doing an app as a business, this last one is the one that'll kill you. Trying to figure out your revenue model. That's where they all fail. Right? You guys are lucky. You're actually not doing that. You're doing tangible, real technologies. Right? understand how you'll get to the market and the commercialization process and the role of partnerships. That's it. Just a reminder, the pitch workshop is on the 27th of February. And the pitch is really a verbal description of what we just talked about. Except instead of 4 pages, you have to do it, I think, in 5 minutes. Really short. All right? So we'll talk about how that happens. How do you get down to the most important, crucial elements of the pitch to describe this? You're still going to describe the business opportunity, the problem in the market, number of customers, your solution, how it solves the problem, how you're going to get there, and what do you need to get there? So that's in February.